Welcome to Data Science Engineer Salary Skills. My name is Richard Kirschner with the Simplilearn team. That is www.simplilearn.com. Get certified. Get ahead. If you have any questions, feel free to visit our website or post below where we do have people monitoring this station who will try to answer your questions. So what's in it for you today? Well, first we're going to start with an introduction to data science. What are we looking at? Who is a data science engineer? Data science engineer skill set, data science engineer job roles, data science engineer salary trends. Keep in mind that a lot of these different terms, and we're focusing on data science. Our last video was on machine learning engineer. A lot of these terms overlap greatly. So understanding both what your focus is and what you enjoy doing and what's out there in the job market are important. So let's take a look at the introduction to data science. Data science is a systematic way to analyze a massive amount of data and extract information from it. And you can see here a couple examples of pulling information from the cloud, from files on computers or saved documents, from sort of databases, and we want to reduce that down to some form of information we can actually use. So we look at the data science is mainly needed for better decision making, either A or B. Do we buy or do we sell our stock? Do we market, which group are we going to market to? Predictive analysis, what will happen next? This is probably the most commonly used when we talk about data science and people are talking about that as predictive. Is this, are we going to have a good return next year? Are we going to have a bad return? What's going on with the business? Are we going to have a lot of forest fires this year? Are we not? Those kind of things. What are we going to predict? Pattern recognition. Is there any important hidden information in the pattern? And this is across the board. We might look at all this different information. Crimes, tracking down crimes, and in our police force, this is becoming more and more common, where they look for commonality and then they're able to go in there and say, okay, we need to investigate what's going on here because this group of people has the same kind of input off of Facebook and everything else as these other 5 people who committed certain crimes. And when we look at data science, we can answer a lot of questions as well. How many viewers like the same movies? Which route will help me reach faster? That's the traveling salesman program. How can I hit the most spots in the shortest amount of time? Will this AC work for 3 years or fail earlier? Yes or no? Is this a good buy or not? Who will win the World Cup? So who is a data science engineer? Are you a data science engineer, or are you going to be looking for a different field? What exactly is a data science engineer? Well, a data science engineer is someone who has programming experience in Python and R, expert level knowledge, ability to write proficient codes. And we have Python and R. I'm going to say Python or R. Once you become really proficient at one language, transferring those skills into another one is usually fairly easy. Now, R is a little different because it is an analytics platform. So going from Python to R, if you already know the data analytics in Python, moving to R is pretty easy. Now, R doesn't have all the other code that you can access with Python. There's so many things you can do with Python that are not data analytics. So that's important to keep in mind, that you should probably be pretty well-rounded in Python and really have a solid foundation in R, or have a solid foundation in R and be well-rounded in another programming language where you really get the programming side of it. Strong SQL and big data experience. So you have to have a strong coding skill with hands-on big data experience. And of course we're showing SQL here, most commonly used, whether you're using a Microsoft SQL server or MySQL server. You can also start thinking Hadoop and Spark and big data access. Hadoop file system is not a huge jump. If you've already learned your SQL and you've already learned your basics in coding, Hadoop sits on top of all that and does a wonderful job creating huge clusters of data. But you really need to know your SQL because that is so common in most of the large companies now accessing their data. And an ability to visualize models and troubleshoot code of the models. This is a kind of an interesting one because these models can get very complicated, so you got to be able to break them down into something that you can put the pieces together and digest each of the pieces. So being able to visualize these models is very important, and then being able to drill down and troubleshoot the different models or the pieces in those models. And you need to be a versatile problem solver, equipped with strong analytical and quantitative skills. A self-starter with a strong sense of personal responsibility and technical orientation. This is an interesting one because when you talk about data science engineer, it's such a new field that most companies don't have it well defined. They don't know what they're looking for. You might not even know what you're looking for. You might have an idea and you're looking for patterns, but where do those patterns lead you? So you really need that self-starter side to jump in there and figure out where to go and be able to communicate that back to the team. And there we go. We have a strong product intuition, data analysis skills, and business presentation skills. And this is what I was talking about is you got to bring that back to the team. So if you don't have a strong product intuition, if you don't know what's going on with the company, what they need, and where you're going with your analysis, it's going to be a dead end. And you got to be able to present that to the shareholders, to your coworkers, which leads us to great teammate with excellent interpersonal skills. And this is kind of a strange one because you spend so much time behind your desk, so you have to be able to kind of float between you're studying all the data and being able to explain this to people in simple terms that they can understand. No one wants somebody to come up and say, yeah, the P score and the F score is this, that, and the other thing, and you might have two people in the room understand you. You have to be able to sit down and explain what that means and why. So let's take a look at the data science skill set. When we talk about data science engineer skill set, we're talking about database knowledge, statistics, programming tools, data wrangling, probably the least favorite and most used, machine learning, data visualization, and then to touch on big data. And so we'll start with database knowledge. The most common databases, of course, your SQL, structured query language. Think rows and columns. It's an essential language for extracting a large amount of data from data sets. So knowledge of the SQL is mandatory for data science engineers. And you can see there's tools required. There's the Oracle database. I mentioned MySQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, Teradata. There are so many different forms of SQL. And it'll just keep coming back and coming back. So if you don't have a solid basic understanding of SQL, go get it. Very important because it will come up. If you don't know it, it's going to bite you. And statistics, of course, that's what this is all about, is figuring out and predicting things. So you need to know your statistics. Statistics is a subset of mathematics that deals with collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data. Therefore, data scientist needs to know statistics. So you need to understand your probabilities and what that means, and what the p-score means, and the f-score, and means, and mode, and median, all that information, standard deviation, all of those you need to be aware of. And then we get into the programming tools, and I mentioned this earlier a little bit, but you need to master any one of these specific programming languages. Programming tools such as R, Python, SAS are essential to perform analytics in data. And again, you can move in there and you can be an expert in just R. You can be an expert in just SAS and a little bit. You can be an expert in Python because most of these, when we're talking about data science and data wrangling, you really kind of get down to the point where you really need to have a full programming language, at least the basics. And if you're going to be working in data science, Python right now is the main one. But there's also Java, C++. So you need to know a solid language, at least the basics of it, so you can understand how to do basic iterations and things like that. I always found that interesting that my sister, who runs a university data analytics center, that's the first question she asks her candidates who come and work for her is, how do you iterate through data? You'd be amazed at how many people don't understand that very basic concept in programming. So when we look at R is a free software environment for statistical computing and graphs, supports most machine learning algorithms for data analytics like regression, association, clustering, and etc. Python is an open source general purpose programming language, and there's our general purpose I was just talking about you need to know a little bit about. Python libraries like NumPy and SciPy are used in data science. NumPy and SciPy are very central to Python, and I'd throw pandas in there also, that module. Those are very central to working with Python and data analytics. And then SAS. SAS can mine, alter, manage, and retrieve data from a variety of sources. It can perform statistical analysis on the data. So where R is the open source platform, SAS is more like the paid for platform. And so it has some things more automated because people are paying for it, developing it, but it's also, if you really start using it as a company, you're going to have to pay for it, where R is free software. Python's also open source and free to use. So we're going to talk a little bit about data wrangling, and I mentioned earlier that is both probably people's least favorite aspects of data science, and also probably one of the places you spend the most time. So when we talk about data wrangling, it is the process of transforming raw data into an appropriate format to make it useful for analytics. And it involves cleaning raw data, structuring raw data, and enriching raw data. And this gets interesting because you'll get stuck on something like, in Python, you might get stuck on something that is a date time based on an integer 64 numpy set. You might not know what all those terms mean because you work in R or something like that. But you get the point that it's all one particular format, and then you have to figure out how to switch it so that the computer can see it correctly in whatever format you're using or whatever analytics platform you're using. Knowledge of machine learning techniques such as supervised machine learning, decision trees, linear regression, KNN, etc. is useful for few job roles. So this is kind of interesting because sometimes that's the center of the job role of a data scientist, and sometimes you just have to be able to apply the programming skills to it so you can get the answer and let somebody else fine-tune your machine learning techniques. So it really depends on what it is you're working with. And you can see here we have our nearest neighbor set up where it groups things together that look alike. Linear regression, you're drawing a line through the data or a curve so you can predict what the next value is going to be. And then our nice decision tree, which starts splitting things up and says, it's sunny out, yes, let's go swimming. No, it's raining, we're not going to go swimming. Yes, it's sunny out, we might go swim. It's raining, we'll stay indoors, yes. We'll walk the dog, no. So you have a decision tree that helps figure out how you get to the end result. So decision trees can be pretty powerful. And data visualization. Data visualization is the study and creation of visual representation of data. Data visualization uses algorithms, statistical graphs, plots, information, graphics, and other tools to communicate information clearly and effectively. This one you really have to master as a data science. This one you really have to master as a data scientist. And there certainly are so many different tools to use to visualize it. But when you're communicating, a picture is worth 1,000 words. When you can put a picture up and people can look at it and go, oh, I see what's going on, that's worth a lot more than saying, yeah, this is good. People hear that and they just kind of go, okay, it's good, but why? And you might say, okay, these numbers make it look good. No, people want something they can see. And there certainly is, Tableau is probably one of the most popular ones out there. Kalik View, Power BI, Google Data Studio. In Python, there's the PyKit and Seaborn. There's all kinds of different options for visualization. You need to master probably at least one or two of them so you understand how they work and how they're different. And then big data. Big data is a massive amount of data which cannot be stored and processed using traditional methods. Big data has various benefits like access to social data can enable organizations to tune their business strategies. Big data can improve customer experience. And so we're usually, when you say big data, we're almost always talking about Hadoop and Apache Spark. It used to be Hadoop is your file system, so that's how you store all your data going across the nodes, and there certainly are other ways to store it. When we talk about Hadoop, we're usually talking about at least 10 terabytes of data when you're dealing with a Hadoop file structure. And then you can use Spark, where Hadoop processes on and off the hard drive. So it's continually reading and writing to the hard drive. Spark is running in your RAM. And so when you're doing a very intensive data process, you'll run a Spark setup, which will spread those processes over multiple computers. And of course, now the two combine, and Spark sits on top of Hadoop, and you get your big data. There's also Talent. Tableau has its own server set up. There's Splunk. Cassandra, you'll hear the Cassandra database. Pintaho, I'm not even sure how to pronounce that one. It's not one I've worked with. Certainly there's a lot of options for big data. The two big players are, of course, Hadoop and Spark. And even your SQL servers and MySQL servers will spread across 5 different servers. And you can be talking about big data across 5 servers with those, pulling them into, say, Apache Spark to do your high-end processing. And then there's non-technical skills. Probably the most important one in data science and any of our data analytics is intellectual curiosity. Updating knowledge by reading contents and relevant books on trends in data science. There's so much going on in this field, and it's exploding now that it's hard to keep track of it all. So you really need to have that curiosity in the data science, probably even more so than a lot of other fields. But I would say in just today's world, you need intellectual curiosity because things are changing so rapidly in today's world, the way that it's going with our technology. Understanding how the problem solved can impact the business acumen. This is the one where a lot of people kind of skip over. You have to have a little business sense. If you don't know how it's going to impact the business, you're going to be in trouble. Why do they want to even pay you to be there unless they know what's going on and they're getting something in return? So this is your bottom line for your paycheck, is what's going on with the business. How is this going to impact the business? What are you doing for them? And communication skills. Companies look for someone who can clearly and fluently translate technical findings to a non-technical team. And I've talked about this a bunch, and I can't even iterate this enough. If you are struggling with your communication skills, work on building them. They don't have to be, this isn't rocket science where you have to know all these complicated terms. What you need to do is take the complicated terms you know from data science and reduce that down to something that anybody can understand. So when you come up and you have, KNN, no one knows what KNN is, unless they're in data science. Nearest neighbor, looking for things that match together. You got to explain that to people who do not have the technical skill in the data science arena. And a data science engineer needs to work with everyone in the organization, including customers. So it's teamwork, and that's always one that throws people for a loop, but ultimately you are analyzing your customer's information. And so sometimes getting in there and rolling up your sleeves, if let's say you're doing data analysis for a sales team and you're backing a sales team, you might have to get in there and go start making some sales and making some phone calls and see what it's like. What is that team doing when they call 15 people in cold calls? And then they do a follow-up 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. Which one works better, 2 or 3? Does it work better to call and send a fax, call and send an email? When should you show up in person if it's that kind of business? So working with everybody, including the customer, is very important with the with this kind of setup and non-technical skills for a data scientist. So let's take a look at some of the roles a data science plays in the job market. Let's drill in there just a little bit here. So when you have a data scientist, they're going to perform predictive analysis and identify trend and patterns that can help in better decision making. Companies hiring data scientists include Apple, Adobe, Google, Microsoft. I would say that's even expanding down to smaller companies, where you're talking about only 100 employees or something like that. They're starting to look at data scientists because they need them to come in and be a part of that team. And the role is understanding challenges of a system and offer best solutions. This should always be the goal of a data scientist, is to be looking at the whole system and then trying to find those patterns that are going to best enhance the company or the business or the whatever group. Maybe you're working with the sales team or the marketing team. And you can see languages. Pretty important to have these are a number of different languages, and again, it depends on your own specialty. There's all kinds of different variations, but we have R, SAS, Python, MATLAB, SQL, Hive, Pig, Spark. You should have at least a knowledge of all of these. Maybe a Python programmer never used R, download it and go through the basics so at least you know what's going on in R versus Python. Because R is pretty powerful for doing a very quick display. And then of course there's a lot of things you can do in Python. You have to be able to do queries on database from time to time, create and modify algorithms which can be used to reduce information from large databases. And usually this is one of those things you do at the beginning, you set it up, and then you kind of let it go until it breaks, and then you have to go back and fix it because your query isn't working. That certainly is a very common thing to have happen, especially if you're pulling data off the web and the internet. And then we have some more companies that are hiring data analysis like IBM, DHL, HP. And so we're talking about data analyst. The role is responsible for a variety of tasks such as visualization, optimization, and processing large amount of data. And so when we talk about a data analyst, we're still talking a lot of the same stuff, but you'll see we now thrown in JavaScript and HTML in here, because that's pretty common with a data analyst versus a data scientist. And you can see that SQL is still pretty solid, and also C++ is pretty big. So some companies also use Java, so I'd put Java in the languages also on that for a data analyst. And then you have a data architect, ensuring that data engineers have best tools and systems to work with. And so companies hiring a data architect are like Visa, Logitech, Coca-Cola. They create blueprints for data management with the best security measures. I cannot highlight that a data architect really spends a lot of time with security measures. That's big. How many hacks have we seen in the last year on large companies that have lost data from millions of their customers and how badly that affects them? And we're looking at languages. You see that SQL is pretty solid across all of these. Under a data architect, XML. That's one that a lot of the data science jobs you don't see as much, but you're going to see more XML with a data architect because there's a lot of XML files that have your security measures embedded in them. And of course your Hive, Pig, those are Hadoop systems for doing some basic queries. So instead of doing the high-end queries, you now have these simplified query systems built into Hadoop and Spark. So if you're using big data, you're going to want to know your Spark also. And then we have our data engineer. The data engineer updates the existing systems with better version of the current technologies to improve the efficiency of the databases. Think admin here. A lot of work tracking down what version you're in of the different programs. What version of Python are you using? What version of R are you using? What version of C++? So companies hiring data engineers are like Amazon, Spotify, Facebook. And they develop, construct, test, and maintain architectures such as databases and long-scale processing systems. And here we have our languages, our SQL, R, MATLAB, SAS, SPSS, Python, Java, Ruby, C++, Perl, Hive, Pig. You pretty much as a data engineer at this level, when you're talking about admin and updating all these databases, need to know all the different stuff that's being used in the company. And you're testing out these structures to make sure they work. And so you really are talking admin level kind of setups. If you like spinning up an admin onto a Google Cloud service or Amazon Cloud service, now you start to get an idea what we're talking about, because then you can test it out up there and then you can bring it back and update it to the company. Statistician creates new methodologies for engineers to apply. And so when we look at this is where we're digging into the math of which models to use, what setup's going to work, what kind of activation do we have on our neural network. These little tweaks are going to make a big difference. And we look for methodologies at a large level. What kind of data are we going to be looking at and how are we going to pull it together? Companies hiring a data engineer, or we're talking about statisticians, we're talking about LinkedIn, PepsiCo, Johnson & Johnson, and of course these companies probably hire a little bit of everything, but they have a lot of statisticians working for them. And so we look at the role, extract and offer valuable reports from the data clusters through statistical theories and data organization. And the languages across the board, we're still seeing SQL, R, MATLAB, SAS, SPSS, Data. That's a new one that we haven't seen in some of the other roles. Python, Perl, an older version. And that shouldn't be a surprise because a lot of these companies probably built a lot of the original packages on Perl. If you go look at Johnson & Johnson. And of course your big data, Hive, Pig, and Spark. And then our database administrator. I mentioned the other one is an admin. They're more an admin level for the software itself. So administrator is another level. Some of the tasks involved are monitoring, operating, and maintaining databases, installation, configuration, defining schemas, training users, etc. And this is interesting, training users, because when you build a database and you define all the different tables that are embedded in that database and how they're all connected, the end user's got to have that information, otherwise you're in trouble. And we have companies hiring data engineers, of course Tableau, Twitter, Reddit. The role ensures that all the databases are available to all relevant users. Again, a little security in there. What role do they have? Who is allowed in and not? And is performing correctly and is being kept safe. And you better be ready to spend some time in security, because again, that's a very big thing nowadays with the number of people who hack into these databases. And the languages are going to be covered. You have your C#, your Java, SQL, Ruby on Rails, XML. Again, there's that XML because a lot of your security is embedded in XML files. Python, all the main players, depending on what the company's using. Data and Analytics Manager. So when you see manager, that means that somebody's going to sit on top and organize the people underneath. So they're going to improve the business process as an intermediary between business and IT. Oh, you better have some really good communication skills for this one. Some of the companies hiring a data engineers are Coursera, Motorola, Slack. And of course, these companies are hiring data scientists in almost all of these fields. So the role oversees the data science operations and assigns the duties to the team according to skills and expertise. So that's a big one. You better be able to communicate what's going on, help your team members come out and be able to communicate with other people. So sometimes your job is just being able to get people to talk to each other. The big thing on that is the whole communication line going from one end to the other. because you can't communicate all the information that everybody's working on. You have to pretty much come in there and help people communicate what there's going on, and also know what they're up to without being micromanagement, because that will crash a company if you micromanage everybody. But if you just let them do whatever they want and they never talk to each other, that will also destroy the company. You got to find that nice middle ground. And you really have to have an overview of everything as a data and analytics manager. One of the things, it's good to have at least one or two solid bases of programming under your belt for a data analytics manager, but you do need to have a very general understanding of all the different tools being used so that you know what's going on with your different team members. Of course, SQL, R, SAS, Java, Python, MATLAB, all of those are big. Business analytics. So this is when you're talking about your BI or your business intelligence and your business analytics. Very important to know this is kind of a subdivision of a lot of the other stuff we've talked about, a lot of the other roles we've looked at. So you possess specialized knowledge of their business domain and apply that knowledge and analysis specifically to the operation of the business. So you might be a specialist in banking. You might be a genetics engineer, so you know about genetics. You might just be general business, helping the marketing. So a lot of companies hiring data engineer are Oracle, Uber, Dell, and the role acts as a link between the data engineers and the management executives. So it's very similar to when we go back up here and we look at data analytics manager. A business analytics is going to also kind of fill that role in between, but they're more specialized in business. And you better know SQL, because when we're talking about business specifically, most of the large companies are storing their data that's up and running right now that people are accessing to purchase something on the Home Depot website or the Uber. They're logging in. You better know your SQL. It's very central to business analytics. So let's go ahead and take a look at the data science engineer salary trends. And you'll see that our source is Glassdoor. That's where we're pulling a lot of our data from. Average base pay is around $117,000 in the U.S., the average salary. And when we look at India, we're talking about $950,000 a year. And those are based on, some of them you need to go ahead and dig deeper to find out what education level versus entry level. But those are a pretty solid base once you're in the industry and once you created your career in there. And we look at the job titles. The most common job title is data scientist. Business Intelligence Manager is the second greatest one. That's kind of good to note. That's why they put that up there as being its own little subcategory of data science managers, a business intelligence manager, because it's such a high level of jobs. And then we looked at some of the other ones: data architect, business intelligence architect. Again, your BI, your business intelligence, gets its own ranking because it's such a high level, it's a business. People want their businesses to make money, so that's who's hiring. Of course, data engineer, business intelligence developer, business intelligence consultant, business intelligence analyst, business analyst, and data analyst. So you can look at the data analyst as being the general one that doesn't go specific to business. So if you're looking just for your career as far as getting a job, probably should have some kind of business understanding in the background. And again, your companies want to make money, so they're going to hire someone who knows business. If banking business, if you specialize in banking, or retail, if you specialize in retail and marketing. And you can see here on the data science salary trends and the growth in data science job listings. It's continually going up. It's since 2014 to 2012, we've gone from 400 to 600. That's a pretty big increase. So, huge growth in this market. It's one of the biggest growing markets right now for jobs and careers. Thank you for joining us with Data Science Engineers, Salary Skills. Again, my name is Richard Kirshner with the Simplilearn team. That's www.simplilearn.com. Come visit our website to learn more about what we have to offer in the education and getting you certified. If you have more questions, you can also post them down below in the YouTube video. We do have people monitoring this channel.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.